sleep and work and sleep and rinse and repeat, right? As long as your body and mind will allow that. It's crazy where you see Sora and a lot of these tools that are using it for the creative side versus like the operational side when creating is one of the best things that humans do. And so I think that's one of the big trends is how are you leveraging AI.
How do you identify what is the kind of business that you want to build, or what is the kind of company that you would like to build? How can one identify these fundamentals?
I almost think that you
It has been a saying that building cross borders is fun, challenging. At the same point in time, we all know that ideas travel fast, and founders and leaders, the way they lead, they have always been built differently. And to share such a leadership story, the story of what is it to build with founders, we have co-founder of Gilder with us, Mr. Brian Lee. It's such a pleasure to have him. He's also co-founder for Romely. He's worked in retail. He has also been very active in the product space. And from being into building escape rooms, he's been a mentor to so many founders now. It's a pleasure to have you, Brian, with us and to know your founder stories and actually working with so many founders and VC networks from around the world.
Thanks, Yukta. Yeah, happy to be here. And best part of that is I get to learn so much from these founders as well, right? So it kind of keeps me sharp and able to learn some of the trends that traditionally I haven't been able to work in. So it's a lot of fun.
That's pretty interesting. I'd love to know, how did this actual journey start with you getting into the startup space instead of like, since you have been a mentor, you've also been into the corporate space. When did that shift exactly occur, when you totally went into founder mode and left all your C-suite or mentorship roles?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think for me, really the first 10 years of my career was still squarely within CPG where I started my career and really met some phenomenal people. I think for me, the biggest shift was kind of realizing that it was the work that what I was doing was, while entertaining, it's still, and everything we do always still feels like work, right? Whether you are a founder or working for someone else, whatever it is, but just didn't feel like something that I personally wanted to commit to for the next 40 years, right? And in many ways, no matter what you're building, whether it's a product based company or service based or whatever, I get it, right? It's a privilege for many people to be able to go into that entrepreneurial or founder life, knowing that as
Right.
founders, right, many people don't pay themselves for the first couple of years, or they are taking out loans or debt to be able to scale companies and things like that. So it's not a choice that is available for everyone. But luckily for me and my co-founder, and through that journey, we had kind of built up that baseline of corporate experience, right, which we were able to take to our time at retail and then eventually try to bite off bigger endeavors. And in turn, right, it's kind of once you get kind of sucked into that realm, it's tough to go back. And I think if you're lucky enough, whether again most founders don't succeed their first go around or second go around, if you're lucky enough to kind of not fail extremely hard, right? But been able to kind of fight through some of those things and continue the journey, it just kind of becomes more and more intoxicating.
It actually sounds so fulfilling that you mentioned that after investing the first 10 years, you actually realize what will work, what would not work. And being into that self aware space wherein you realize that this is how you'd like to impact or create a better impact in the space, I think that matters a lot.
Yeah, no, thanks. And trying to, right? Where there's just so many founders that also go through that same thing, whether it's right after undergrad or MBA or whatever program, and they're kind of figuring out that balance. And I think more than ever, it's been twofold. A lot of people are going into this entrepreneurial side, whether it's a side hustle, whether it's something full time. And it's tough because it's not necessarily because of a want, right? A lot of people you see more than ever are working full-time jobs and also driving for Uber or also having a content creator side hustle or doing other things. And it's part because of passion, as I hope for a lot of people, but also part because, hey, this is what it takes to, unfortunately pay rent or put groceries and do other things. And so a lot of founders do this for different reasons, whether it's freedom of time, financial freedom, or independence, whatever it is. But I think inevitably, if you can create something that doesn't always feel like work, at the end of the day, it's still work, of course, but where you don't mind working, it doesn't have to be 100 hours a week, of course, but you don't mind putting in those longer hours, then it does seem like something that you can do, because it's more about, not a hobby, but it's fun, right? It doesn't necessarily feel like that aggressive level of work that many of us, are experienced.
You like the hustle culture. So according to you, what do you think? Like if you had to talk about an ideal, let's say, time management system, or like if you genuinely want to build something. So I mean, we talk about 100-hour work week, 70-hour work week, sometimes like 18 hours if you have in a day, just work and build it. So what do you think is the right schedule for any founder? Should you actually be just in that hustle culture, or have a work life balance, or work life balance is a myth when you're building something?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of different, whether it's podcasts or speakers, like especially with YouTube and whatnot, like I think that the hustle culture kind of mindset can be very toxic, and at the same time, it can work really well for some people. Like I was certainly one of the people that subscribed to the like, okay, I'm gonna work and sleep and rinse and repeat, right? As long as your body and mind will allow that. And I think, certainly in my 20s, that was more what I could handle, right? And now, still some today, but between, my daughter and family and kind of trying to balance everything out too, right? Priorities certainly shift. But I think it's certainly whatever works for that founder, right? I don't think that there's like a gold standard, but again, I know plenty of founders who put in, those like 12 to 13-hour days, and they love it, and they're crushing and doing well. And I know a lot of founders who maybe work your standard, 7, 8 hours a day, right? It also just depends on the type of business you're looking to build. Are you, did you raise up, 50 million Series A, and you need to return that value to investors, and you need to build this, unicorn and do that, right? They're probably going to look down on you a bit if you're only working 8 hours a day. So it kind of just depends on like what the end goal is. And for me, between the escape rooms and Ronly and Gilder and what we're trying to do, like more so, and I feel like I can comfortably speak for my co-founders on this as well, is that we got into this space because we love working with other entrepreneurs and other founders and people that are, again, building anything, right? From a person that was C-suite at Oracle and now building a seaweed snack company to someone who's trying to build a marketing agency, right? Everyone's trying to create value and do things that they feel like they're experts in and enjoy. So again, whether that's 100 hours a week, whether that's 40 hours a week, whatever I think works for you as a founder so that you don't burn yourself out and you can still deliver your product and your service, that I would encourage them to kind of keep following.
That actually makes a lot of sense to understand because it's like what's your sweet spot, and in the end, what is the outcome that you're delivering? So even if you're working 100 hours and you're not able to deliver that outcome, it doesn't matter how many hours you put in, but it genuinely matters what is the outcome that you actually generate for the person who's actually working with you, like the investors or your client that you're working with. Your customers should feel happy with the services or the product. What kind of businesses do you usually like, are a part of Gilder community right now? Are they like SaaS product, service? What kind of emerging businesses are right now there in the our community as well?
Sure. It's a good mix. I'd say there's probably about 60% that are your traditional product-based companies, right, between fintech and SaaS or CPG, anything like that. And then other 40%, which are your service-based businesses from the venture studios and the consultancies, agencies, things like that. And so we kind of intentionally focus on that because again, like a lot of founders, no matter what industry you're in, no matter what stage you're in, you're seeing a lot of the same problems, the same pain points, whether that's hiring for a team of 100 or hiring for a team of one. And so a lot of that comes down to when you are at that stage, you can learn a lot from the CPG founder that's got, 2 SKUs, and you can learn a lot from the CPG founder that's got 100 SKUs. So at that point, I think that we try to look for founders that have a good balance, whether they've been doing that industry their entire careers or kind of like me, right, where they bounce a little bit between CPG and SaaS and consumer tech. But yeah, mostly scalable type ventures from the product or service based side.
That's actually interesting to understand, like what the market is, and based on the current startup scenarios or where founders want to pivot, what are the top two emerging trends that you feel are very prevalent these days?
Good question. I don't want to beat a dead horse when I say AI, right? But because I think that's everyone will acknowledge that. But I think it's like I'll take that a step further, right? And say like either different levels of agentic AI in the sense of
Yeah.
where it's like, okay, we'll have AI complete tasks for you. It was really interesting. I think it was through the Anthropic CEO, but this article I read where, they kind of highlighted how different generations use AI currently. And I think they said where it was like the older generation used it almost more of like a search engine, right? What Google would do, right? I want a recipe for a meatloaf or something, how do I make it? Then you have
Yeah.
kind of more like millennials or Gen X a little bit using it, quote unquote, as he said, as it was intended, right? You're using it to streamline operations, you're using it for deep research, a lot of these other tools. And then Gen Z and younger almost using it as like I don't want to say therapist, right? But as a friend, almost like, hey, they'll upload a photo of themselves. I'm going out tonight. Should I wear this, right? Or what do you suggest? And so it is interesting looking at the different how generations use it, but then it kind of becomes at that deeper level. All right, what is AI really doing for us? It's crazy where you see Sora and a lot of these tools that are using it for the creative side versus like the operational side when
Yeah.
creativity is one of the best thing that humans do. And so I think that's one of the big trends is how are you leveraging AI? Creative was always the first one, right? With like GPT-1 and everything from ChatGPT. It's like now it's kind of shifting like how do we do it so that we as humans can save times on a lot of the repetitive and automated tasks that we do. So I think that's kind of one of the big trends that I've seen. And then secondly, it's also how do we as humans, and you just kind of see layoffs right across the board, not just in tech, right, and everything, but it's companies that lean into AI but don't completely, I guess, ignore right the human component that you need for things. Whereas you look at like Walmart and a lot of these places that when they rolled out self checkouts, yes, right, you're probably saving headcount for 7 to 8 cashiers, but
Yeah.
can you repurpose those cashiers for other things that you would need in the store, right? From inventory to management to whatever. And most cases, you still have a person, right, at these self checkout places because of technology issues, right? People, helping customers. So it's basically finding ways instead of just completely reducing headcount, how can you still preserve your talent and leverage AI to either be more efficient, create a better customer experience, not just create better savings, for your shareholders. So there's lots of different ways that AI can help that and kind of finding a balance instead of just picking one, I think has been a trend that more people have been adopting.
I think that's very comprehensive as well as to how AI is actually changing so many landscapes, and people are still figuring it out, like what AI is up to, what it brings to the table, how can they understand it better. Sometimes I do feel that AI as a technology, language learning models have been there for so many years. Like you've had Python, you've had so many like SQL and all these
Hmm.
languages to teach you data. And it's just that now it's like booming. It's at the surface level and everyone needs to adapt it. But was it not there? It was always there. It's just that now the adaptability needs to work in a way wherein you are adapting with speed. So like since it's
Hmm.
moving fast, you gotta cope. It's not that you can move faster because you're a human. You just gotta cope with how it's going now.
100%. Yeah. And I think a lot of people that knew about it, just it was the way that computers, right, when they first came out, were not, it was much more of a commercial product, not for individual users. And now you're seeing like one of
Everyone
my
has it.
original mentors, it's like she basically stated, Diana Stepner, that, today is the worst day for AI, right? It just gets better and better. And from even a year ago, right, 2 years ago, the speed at which people can use it for and the things that it does is just insane. And so, how are you as a startup founder, right? If there was kind of like one piece of advice I would give, it's like, what portion of your day are you using AI, right? And if it's like less than 50%, depends on the role, of course, right? But like if you're in sales, right? Every sales call, right? You should be kind of transcribing and using this to take notes. If you're in customer success or operations, whatever it is, like 50% of what you're doing is not being enhanced by AI, you're probably behind the ball. And so that to be said, you're right, you shouldn't be completely reliant on it. But the idea is why do things that take longer that would not, that allows you to free up your brain space for other things when you don't have to. So that's kind of the one tip I'll give in that. Again, I'm sure everyone will kind of echo that same sentiment and it's nothing new, but really this is the time. And as coming from someone who I'll self admit is not necessarily the most technologically advanced, it's been something for me to spend. All right, can I dedicate at least an hour a day to learn new things that will
About
help
AI.
make my life easier? Yeah.
I really love how you've been able to like put your hand in AI and learn so much about it. And I would love to understand since all these tech advancements would keep on going. I mean, I don't think that the future is far as long as we are alive. We do see flying cars. We do see people moving in these bubbles because of some biotech war that happened. So, and I think we would be alive to witness all of it from our bare eyes as well. it's that future is not that far. However, when you actually started Gilder, or like three of you came together as founders to build something like that, what was the idea and why a community led business? Like, why helping founders or helping them raise funds, mentor them? Why this area? Like, why create this global space for founders? What was the idea behind that?
Right. No, that's a great question. And the idea, like, it was just something that we all saw ourselves that we personally went through, but that also, through mentoring at Techstars and Founder Institute and Watson Institute and talking to a lot of founders all over the globe, right? It was like different industries, different locations, different countries and time zones. Everyone went through these same issues,
Yeah.
whether it was your point, right? Hiring or fundraising or just go to market, just anything. And so for us, it was something that we wanted to really support founders and entrepreneurs that were trying to build things that they also saw as problems, right? It could be problems that they saw in their local communities, in their cities, right? That their family dealt with, that their coworkers dealt with. And no one to me is more passionate about fixing these problems than someone who's directly been impacted by it or knows people that, have been impacted by it. So it was just really invigorating for like, why do we choose the space? Because it's what keeps us kind of excited about everything that we do. You get to wake up every day, hopefully, right, make an impact at the very least. We know that sometimes all it takes is one conversation, not necessarily through us, right, but maybe someone in our network, someone else in the community to change the way that someone thinks about their business or their model. And for us, community was the most effective way because again, you've got so many phenomenal, incubators and accelerators and in person and all these different elements that are out there in the world. But we just saw that they were very fragmented and tailored to very specific groups, on the higher end, on the lower end, first time founders, founders that had multiple exits, right? And this big network already. So for us, it was just more so how do you really put people to build together organically and in the time where founders have very little time for their own self development, right? Outside of building feature roadmaps and working with customers, how can you fill their cup and give them, the right connections or relationships to nurture, the right value added events and ways where they don't have to go out and just kind of search the ether for, what's a good webinar that's going to add value for me, or is this person really going to help me, or are they just trying to sell me something, right? So eliminating a lot of that fluff and just kind of getting, down to the core of business and growth.
And my brain is like running in a good horsepower space to now get your POV that when you look at a business, or how do you tear it down? Like, as you mentioned, like the fundamentals or the first principles. So, whenever you're presented with, okay, this is a business idea or this is how the business looks like, and you like to get deeper into that business, how do you tear down that business into pieces and then come with the fundamental which actually makes sense, like the core of that business that actually makes sense?
No, that's a good one. I think for me, looking at like the very first thing I always try to consider, and this is me kind of putting my product hat on, is this a nice to have or a need to have? And there are plenty of nice to have businesses that are extremely successful, right? You look at like a TikTok or Instagram, a lot of these things, right? You don't need social media in many cases, right? But like they're some of the most successful companies out there. But I look at need to haves in many ways, almost like an Uber, right? And some of these other things that you look at what's the stickiness of this, like how much, like I think one of the documentaries for Uber, it's like they were talking about, I don't know what this quote was valid or not, but it was like once you have your second ride with Uber, they're a customer for life. And that was kind of how they looked at like this was so impactful and people realized the value of this. Like, and I guess it's kind of true, right? Like, once you kind of start using it and realize, wow, this is much more efficient, faster, not necessarily always cheaper, but sometimes than the alternative. And so when I talk to founders that are trying to build different things and they come to me with ideas, I'm not the person, like it's not my job or other mentors or people jobs necessarily to say like you shouldn't do this, right? Or this isn't a good idea. But it's more so to kind of ask the right questions and challenge them. Like, hey, if you want to build a, Tinder for dogs or something, like totally, go for it, right? And you want like to find whatever, like some crazy idea that you have, like this is what you should be thinking about though, right? Are is this just a fun little project that you're doing because, you just enjoy it or a friend shared it with you, or is it something that you want to turn into a legitimate business where again you are bringing on investors and you're not just going to kind of throw their money away. So that's always the question: is there repeatability to this model and what you're doing, and is the timing right? So you look at like blue ocean markets where like if you feel like you're the one that's explaining the problem to people versus coming to them with a solution for an existing problem, are you too early in this market? Because if you feel like you have to be explaining this problem to someone and then realizing, oh, I didn't realize I had that, are they going to actually pay you for the service? Are they even going to use it? Because we know it's already so hard to get people to download free apps and free platforms. So if it's not truly a dire need to have problem, are they even going to do that?
Yeah. And I think you've made it very simple. Like sometimes it's like the shiny object syndrome. Nice to have looks so appealing that you complicate your product so much that then the customer or the consumer and gets confused that is this something that they exactly want? And that confusion then leads to the product failing is because the exact need is not addressed. And that's what I love about a lot of businesses or in general when people go for these one-on-one services and service-based business as well, that you offer them what they want, but you give them what they need. And
Yes.
in that area you're able to provide like for example if someone like in same as you mentor startup owners, so I think mindset is a very huge part, but you can never say that it's mindset coaching. It comes as a need, as a give, obviously, like you would always say that you're helping them build business, but at the same point in time the base of building that business is having growth mindset. So this is the need, and that's why this is one module or this is one lecture or this is one-on-one that we're going to have just to understand the mindset so that the consistency of that founder does not break.
100%. And that's where you look at so many founders that have different reasons for going into it. Kind of like I said earlier, with whether it's financial freedom or whatever it is, you can have different reasonings, but still feel so strongly about why you need to do that. And when, again, if they feel that strongly about idea Z, that's maybe not as valid as idea A, right? It's not our jobs as mentors or maybe advisors a little bit, but it's our job to kind of provide guidance and let them figure it out while still supporting, right? And kind of giving a realistic picture of like, hey, if you want to fail, you got to fail fast. That's kind of the golden rule with entrepreneurship. The longer you delay, right, the longer you either burn resources or burn time that you could be doing another venture. And so I think that's kind of been the biggest thing. You have a lot of founders that don't fail fast, right? And it's totally okay to pivot, but I think when you get to your, seventh or eighth pivot, it's probably time to understand, am I going after the right customer? Is something wrong with my product, or is the market just not big enough for this? And at a certain point, you just kind of have to accept that and then move on, right? And if entrepreneurship is embedded in your DNA and what you want to do, right? Find that next idea, find that next market that will inevitably give you that same passion as your first one.
I'll definitely take that as a note to take care of it. Like if you're failing, fail fast, and then just have these key notes in place as to what you're doing. And I would love to understand your psyche as well. Like, how do you determine that this is something that you want to do at this phase in your life? Like, so many people just jump into an entrepreneurial career because sometimes they want to escape something. Like, okay, I'm so tired of my 9 to 5, let me build a business of my own without doing a lot of trial error product discovery, just enter into a business. So how do you identify or that what is the kind of business that you want to build or what is the kind of company that you would like to build? How can one identify these fundamentals?
That's a good one. I almost think that it's not necessarily about what the idea is, but it's almost like what's the end goal, right? Is your end
Yeah.
goal that like, hey, I want to, and that's kind of why I ask a lot of founders whether they come for, fundraising advice or they share a pitch deck. It's like, what is your end goal? Do you want to be the founder of this company, right? And build it for the next 30, 40 years, right? And pass this off, to your kids or whatever? Is this something you want to build because you're really passionate about it, but then you want to exit and build something else, right? You're that serial entrepreneur. You just kind of like that stage. And I think whatever you decide from what your end goal is, that'll kind of, you can build anything, right? That's the fun part, especially with AI too and vibe coding and everything out here. Like this has been the best time that has ever to build any type of business, whether it's brick and mortar, whether it's a brand, whether it's software. And so the level of what you're trying to build will come down to what's your bandwidth, right? Are you a solo founder? Do you have a team? Does your team have the same goals that you have? Because, right, we know that the number one reason for startups failing is either product market fit or, lack of cohesive like team vision, right? Founders falling out, whatever it is. And so I think whatever your end goal is, whether you're doing this by yourself or with a team, can you get everyone to march, in that same direction and focus on that? And in turn, right, the business that you inevitably create will align with that. And so, right, you're not going to, if your goal is to run a company for 40 years and have hundreds of employees, right, and provide, for their families and healthcare and all the stuff, right, you're probably not going to start like a shoe shining business, right, or something like that. Not to say that, a shoe shining business can grow to that, but generally, the end goal will dictate the kind of general idea. And a lot of times, nothing wrong with it. I see founders that start off, hey, I've got this idea, I just want to grow it. And that's totally fine too. But having that kind of long-term vision, or at the very least, like a 2 to 5 year vision, will help understand like, hey, I've seen founders dump millions of their personal savings into businesses, either only to see it fail, right? And it's just kind of like, all right, was that you're in your late 60s? Was that money that's, you could easily, spend that and you'll still be fine? Or is the stuff that now you need to go back to a 9 to 5 because you blew all of your savings? So whatever that kind of mold as it fits into your personal life, whatever that looks like, that kind of help dictates what you want to do. So I've seen almost kind of it work from a back end to help determine for founders, all right, should I pursue this or not?
And based on this data point or an understanding of how it looks like or what is it to actually run a business, what do you think makes any business profitable or like $1 million business in, let's say, monthly revenue? Like, and I know that it's very few businesses touch that $1 million revenue on a month basis or maybe on an yearly basis. So according to you, what makes any business $1 million one?
I definitely think part of it is either repeatability or essentially like what does that recurring revenue look like and how long, like what does your churn look like for your customers? Because churn just varies so much between like community-based businesses, software to consultancy, everything. And not every business is going to have kind of that same, whether it's you're measuring it by monthly recurring revenue or annual. But I think for that, like we'll just call it first off, a million in ARR, right? Which is already kind of like most founders, right, don't even get to that first 10,000 MRR stage. But when we think about that, it's like, are your customers coming back? Are they asking and requesting for new features, right? Are they kind of like, is it something that you look at, let's look at kind of CRMs, whether it's like a Salesforce or HubSpot or things like that. There's a lot of them out there, right? And so some people might argue, hey, if I'm on HubSpot or one thing and all of a sudden a new CRM comes out and it's charging a tenth of the price and does the exact same features, most people would consider moving there. But are you able to build up that type of brand loyalty and retention and sticking point where your customers feel either connected to you as a founder, as a team, or the brand and the mission? And so the companies that can get to that, right, and have that very sticky product that once they start using, right, it's really tough. Not that they can't leave it, but that they don't want to leave it. So I think can you build something like that, right, where it's one thing to get a ton of users early on, right, a ton of customers initially, but if they're not giving you a good, CSAT or NPS score, and they're not coming back and being your advocates and referring their friends and other colleagues, then it's going to be very tough to get to 1 million ARR, right? Nevertheless, 12 million ARR. So I think that's kind of the thing that I've seen the most. And that's again across consumer tech, that's across, B2B, SaaS, anything, right? It's like, are your customers going to be your biggest advocates to bring in either new referrals or to keep coming back to you and your company?
And that's so much about the services or product offered as well. Like I was doing this research that so many creators or let's say celebrities launch their brand, and it's very easy for them to actually have the first customers because of the face. However, it is very difficult to retain the customers if your product does not maintain that quality. For example, so many celebrities started their beauty brands, whereas only very few could sustain because the product quality needs to be good enough that they become a recurring customer. It's not that they're facing, like, if your customer service is broken, if your website is poor, if your product quality is actually bad, like you're having high profit margins but the product is not delivering, so nobody would come back. And I think that's when fame brings you great audiences, but it doesn't keep it recurring. Like what happened to Prime? Gen Z liked it so much and it was at peak, but since it was not the best quality for so many people, and they felt that they're paying too much for maybe just flavored water or
Sure.
flavored branded water. I mean, I don't want to sound it like this. Maybe if this reaches to someone from Prime, they're gonna be like, "No, Prime's better."
Yeah, but you're right. And the product, of course, will always play a big role. And again, it's like, yeah, you look at Rihanna and Fenty and like her, her brand, and it's like, she had it's because nothing in this world is very easy, right? But it's like you can buy first customers, right? In almost any industry, you can take it at a loss, right? Whatever it is, but like to get them coming back and like loyal to you and your brand and the quality of it, that is always going to be the first and foremost most important thing. And so you have so many. That's why it's when I talk to founders, right? That of course it's important to be protective of your IP and what you've built. But there's so many founders building almost identical types of companies out there in the world, right? I mean, there's plenty of other communities or groups, right, offering different versions of Gilder out there. But again, that's kind of where you look at, is this something that's going to hit a unique market, that you're delivering something to a certain extent that they're not going to find elsewhere. And circling back to your point of, right, like you look at The Rock and Terramana, right, his tequila. I personally haven't had it, so but like I'm sure it's good. And so like you look at someone trying it, right? They say, okay, this is good. I enjoyed it. I would buy more, or I'm going to go back to Patron or Don Julio or something else. Again, it's like, are you buying this because you like, oh, I just saw a movie with The Rock, like this could be good, right? Are you buying it because the quality is that much better or whatever, or are you buying it because you just want to try something else? And I think the
Yeah.
same goes for software and a lot of different things. And circling back to your original point of like, as a founder, what would you focus on to kind of get that edge? It's like you look at your early customers, right? Your first customer, are they a customer for life, right? Or are they, did they churn after a month, and why did they churn? And every time you kind of make improvements and build on that, hopefully you can either bring them back, or you're just increasing the LTV for future customers because the product is just that good.
Absolutely, yes. And since you are into right now a community led business and helping so many founders, so I have a two-folded question. One is, what do you think right now founders need the most, since there are so many resources that you also provide to people in the community? So, based on your understanding, what do you think they need the most? And second, what is the most difficult part of sustaining community led business?
Good one. Love those questions. I think that for me, it's going to seem like a really simple answer, right? But I think it's community for the first answer, right? What do founders need the most? And that's a very basic answer, right? Some people, obviously we have a lot of people that need help with sales or fundraising and pitching, right? Like there's a lot of like in-depth kind of like in the weeds types of things. But the biggest thing for us is when we say community, it's, having someone that you can truly be open and honest with, right? Like, that you can have these kind of real conversations, these unbiased conversations where we get it, right? When you talk to your advisors, even your co-founder, right? Even your family, especially, like everyone's kind of got different opinions on things. And like, can you find a circle or a group that is just truly there for like your well-being, right? And like what's best for you. And I think it's very rare we find things like that, outside of kind of our close friend circles and things like that, maybe a partner or whatever. So yeah, what do founders look for most, right? I think it is that community, because being a founder is super lonely at times, whether you even have a team of co-founders or you're by yourself. And so who are those people that you can truly rely on, that when you're having, issues with customers or co-founders or investors, right? You can just go to them for, again, that unbiased advice, whether they've done it successfully over 40 years or successfully over 4 years. So that's kind of the biggest thing that I've seen, and just cool seeing friendships kind of get born out of it. People generally want to work with people that they like. And so these are things that kind of just get formed out of those organic conversations. And I apologize. Could you, what was the second question again?
Yeah, the second question was more that what is the most difficult part of running a business which is driven by community? Like community is a revenue engine.
Got it. Yep. So yeah, I mean, right. There are literally millions of communities out there. Not just online too, right? From religion and church to school to whatever it is. So community has to be at like, I've only been in this space for the past, 6 or so years, right? So there are far more, experienced community leaders and people than me. But at least from what I've seen, right, from leading them to being just in a bunch of communities to also kind of leading like regional groups, is like it just needs to feel like the leadership or like the face of the community needs to be like very present and active. You see so many groups where it's kind of just like, okay, we just want and when I say active, right, that doesn't mean that they need to be like driving everything, because of course you want individuals and stuff contributing to the conversation, starting these trends. But they need to know, like, there needs to be a lot of intention behind most posts, and a lot of people don't will choose not to engage. It's like, I think you have maybe 10% of like any community which are kind of like you're very active, like will be engaging, going to every event, kind of commenting on everything, sharing articles, things like that. You have a percentage that, 40, 50% that will kind of go to things, but are just not as active. And then a smaller percent that are just never active, right? They're kind of like the fly on the wall that just kind of takes everything in, but doesn't contribute back. And very rarely will you have a community where like all 100% or the majority are like those super contributors, right? Like every community, naturally, you just have to have different hierarchies there. But I think the most important piece when you build community is, can people always identify, right, the North Star, like who, if I have questions, if I need to talk to someone, like who can help me with that, right? Like that needs to be very clear. And also knowing that I feel very comfortable asking this question, knowing that I will get, organic responses, right, truthful responses without any type of ulterior motive, right? And that's why for Gilder, we always say like we're not a networking community, like love when founders, from the group work together, but very strict on kind of the no sales, right? No, like everything should be there as a point of support. And when you kind of create a space like that, people feel very comfortable asking a lot more questions, knowing they're not going to get spammed, by like people like, oh, like, I do fractional work for this or XYZ, right? Like when it feels organic, you get a lot better outcomes. And so I think that was always the biggest piece is, can you really from the get-go instill that culture in the community and then protect it as you scale. For us, right, we've got 300 members, so a little bit easier to do that when you have got that number versus, tens of thousands. And part of that is intentional because we never launched this, right, because we wanted this to be a unicorn, right, or because our goal was to become millionaires of a community-based business. It was really to provide that safe space for founders to engage and know that, in a world where I'm in probably a dozen other types of communities and groups, but I really hyper engage with just one and two. And how can you get more people like that are choosing to engage with your community versus the others out?
It's extremely exhaustive list as well when you look at it. Like anyone who wants to run a business that has community as a major focus or community as a major revenue engine needs to take care of all these. And I love how you mentioned that you exactly know that you would never call your entire company or the space that we've built at Gilder as a networking space. It's far beyond that. Having that understanding that this is far beyond networking and not just around networking matters so much since I think that's the, as you mentioned, clarity in what a business is all about leads the business ahead. And that is what has actually been shaping how Gilder onboards the members and works around. Which also brings me to understand how has your experience been working with such diverse founders coming from different parts of the globe and different ideas. What do you think? Since it's so culturally diverse as well, so how has your experience been with that?
Amazing, right? That's kind of been the very few words to just other than super rewarding. And for me, I kind of alluded earlier, right? It's a chance to learn from every single founder I talk to, whether they've been in, like I said, for 40 years or 4 years. And some of the founders that I've had a chance to kind of talk to on a regular recurring basis, right, that I consider my friends in many ways are based in LATAM and or Nigeria and Europe, Asia, kind of all over. And it helps me understand a little bit more from like not just the macro trends in those countries and continents, but again, right, you might see markets that you'd think, oh yeah, like this works in the US, it should work there, or vice versa. And it's just very different. And so being able to, and I think that's kind of why community is so important, is so often, right, you have communities of the same type of people, right? Whether that's political beliefs or religious beliefs or ethnic, whatever it is. But it's important you can have that, right? But as long as people have varying opinions or varying ways to contribute, I think that's most would argue that's a big thing. And so being able to talk to founders with so many different kind of backgrounds and viewpoints helps, I think, gradually all of us become better founders. But for me particularly, and what a great opportunity that I got to do was here at Watson Institute, which is based out in Boulder. This past cohort of the 24 founders that I was, as part of the entrepreneur residence for their program, I think like 18 or 19 of them were not based in the US. So from Vietnam to Mexico City to South Africa and just so many different cities and countries. And that for me was just such a cool eye-opening experience where like, again,
Yeah.
I love mentoring for Founder Institute here in Chicago. But again, and that's kind of where I get the hyper local level of mentoring those opinions versus a true worldwide viewpoint. So yeah, I would argue that every founder, right, whether you're building in a specific market, should always have, have that founder pen pal, right? Or have that other person that is going through the same thing on a different in a different country, right? On a different continent, in a different industry, just because it helps you kind of stay grounded and realize that, we are all in this together.
I totally love this answer and how nuanced it is as well, is because that actually brings us closer to like world as a whole and attaches us to these global emotions as well. As to deep down, each one of us is human, and even though so many things would be different amongst each one of us, however, us being human, being driven by emotion first, logic second, would always stay there as long as sapiens are there. So I love that aspect of human connections in such diversity that we are at right now.
Yeah, and it's, that's why with your podcast here too, it's kind of great for, being able to see some of those stories that other founders have shared, and I appreciate the chance to kind of learn from them as well. And you do a great job of kind of extracting that piece out because so often than not, as founders, you just kind of are heads down, building, cranking out features and products and things like that. And it just takes a little bit of time, right? It takes 20 minutes out of your day to go, read a little bit of a book, listen to a podcast, go do something to kind of help keep that perspective sharp, whether or not, right, it's someone that's in your industry or whether it's someone doing something completely different.
Oh, yeah. Which also brings us to an interesting segment. It's called Seven Questions to Fame. So I would be having seven rapid fire questions for you. And let me know once you're ready. I'm happy to shoot.
Yeah, all right, let's do it. I'm ready.
Okay. So whenever a founder comes to you with an idea that they want to launch in a global market, what do you prefer? Global first or local first?
I'll put on my investor hat. I would say global first. As a founder and operator, local first.
Love the answer. What would you choose for yourself? Money, fame, impact, or peace?
Tough one. Definitely not fame. Definitely, of course, money's important. I would say somewhere between impact, and peace. Obviously, if you can build things that support those two options, then that's a great thing to do for this world. But I think at the end of the day, we're all trying to leave an impact, whether it's with kids, whether it's with family, whether it's with strangers, right? So probably impact.
I love the answer. What is one thing that drives you as a founder?
I would say impact again almost, but I think yeah, just being able to those takeaways, right? Those little things where someone can just say, "Hey, like thank you for this," right? This saved me X number of hours. This helped me XYZ. That to me, kind of the impact that you can have on people knowingly or unknowingly is what keeps me excited about this every day.
Since you've been in the industry for more than 2 decades now, if you had to change one thing about any experience of your life in the industry, what would you like to change?
What would I change? I would say I would probably say access, right? How people get access.
Hmm.
And for me, LinkedIn and a lot of people is a great tool, but it's really changed in many ways from what it first was. And so how can you provide those in underserved communities and underserved areas, right? LinkedIn was a great start to that. But let's be honest, right? Most people aren't having, super deep, meaningful conversations on LinkedIn. So
Yeah.
is there another platform, right? Kind of almost like what Lunch Club was doing or things like that, that, it doesn't matter what your age, right? Whether you're still in I've talked to so many impressive high school founders, right, that are 15, 16 years old that are building super impressive companies, right, that they started off when they were even younger. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even really start, this true entrepreneurial journey until, a decade ago. But so, yeah, there's just so many different things that I would say to get the earlier you can get on that kind of like personal networking journey or provide access to that, that's what I would change.
What would you recommend someone who's in their 20s or 30s? Should they be doing like going for a corporate job, or they should be building their own startup or their own company?
I'd say whatever makes them happiest and whatever will help fill their cup. And for a lot of people, right, like, working a corporate job and then they go spend time with family, they go skiing, they go hiking, right? They go spend all that time and like they love that, right? Like do that, right? Because being a founder will probably not give you enough time to do that until maybe 20 years after, right? Once you've kind of sold or exited or are comfortable in that spot. For me, like I enjoy doing those things too, but playing basketball or hockey or a lot of these things that I enjoy come second nature to the supporting the founders and customers that I have for Romley and Gilder and so on. And so I do that because I also love it, but know that has to be the first and foremost on my priority, even when I'm like on vacation, doing anything like that. So for a founder making that decision, whatever makes you happiest, if you're going to be happy grinding out 80 to 100-hour weeks, go do that, right? If you're going to be happy working a corporate job and then kind of shutting a laptop down, doing whatever, right? Do that. If you want to do both, right? Find a side hustle. Whatever is going to keep you smiling, right? And as much as we can, right, throughout the week.
It's a beautiful and insightful answer. Thank you for sharing this. I'd love to know what
Sure.
has been one advice that changed how you view the world.
Think, and I'm still working on this, right? But I think it's just kind of cutting out the noise so often with social media, just everything that we do in our social circles, right? Whatever. Like we're always comparing ourselves to people, right? And I think just the kind of the advice I'll put out this like no one really cares about what you're doing except for you, right? Like you can have these conversations at dinner parties or whatever, like, oh, things like that. But like, I know, if you're scared to start that TikTok and put your face on camera, like go do it, right? If you're scared to start this company and realize, oh man, my friends raised like $20 million the first time go around, I just failed. I can't get an investor to meet me. Like, that's okay, right? Like you're in the boat with 99% of other founders. Like, if it's not this one, try again, right? Do something else. But like, don't worry about comparing yourself to other people. Your journey is your own, right? Like it took me, all of my 20s, most of my years into my 30s, right, to do that. And I'm still doing that, right? I think it's human nature to do that. But at the end of the day, right, like you're providing for yourself, your family, your customers, whatever you want to do, just focus on that, right? Whether that's a $100,000 a year business, whether that's $100 million a year business, do what really is going to make you happy and just cut out that outside noise. To future self, stop working so hard, right? Or I don't know, just find time for, yeah, just like living life from a very type A person. I think a lot of founders share that same thing. It's like so much of my week is segmented and balanced on my calendar, right? I've got these types of events, these types of things. Yesterday, July 3rd, just kind of had a break in the calendar. And then I was like, yeah, like my wife was taking my daughter to this kind of Bubbles Play Academy, right? And so I was like, yeah, I'll join with you guys, right? We went to like Chuck E. Cheese after her first time, right? She's 15 months, but like we had pizza, right? And it was just like, I had planned on during those 2 hours, I was like, this is what I'm going to do instead, or I'm going to catch up on emails and tasks. But I'm like, you know what, it's a nice day. I'm just going to go with them, right? And that turned out to be a super fun day. And so my advice from my future self and every other founder is like, stick to your routine, right? That's what's going to help you grow, but leave time to just go do a fun thing, right? Go to the park, go to that party, go to the whatever, right? Go see a movie. Just do something that, maybe at least once a week that you didn't plan on doing, because that's life, right? Like I always think about what do you do? What are you going to do when you retire, right? Sit on a beach, go drink beers, go do whatever. Leave some of that into your daily routine now, right? If you're not already doing that, because you never know what can happen 24 hours from now, 24 years from now. Well said. Yep, exactly. So yeah, being present, like you said, that couldn't give anything else, better advice from my future self, my past self than what you said right there. Let's see. A lot of different things have kind of always crossed my mind. I think the one thing I would speak about is kind of on that time management, right, or prioritization. And so for any individual, right, this goes to whether it's your business, this goes to whether it's whatever you're doing personally. But so often, right, we get caught up in like this kind of the shiny object syndrome, like, oh, I have to like go mail this letter. I have to go, take care of this bill online. I have to go, make the bed or whatever. And a lot of time that paralyzes us from making that first decision. And so often we kind of wait and let things build up, and then it becomes this kind of insurmountable mountain that we're just like, oh, like I can't do this. I'll put it up to later. And these things pile up. And especially true for founders, right? Where you're doing everything from fundraising to hiring to investor newsletters to customer newsletters. And so the biggest lesson that I would teach is, right, it's like you just start taking those bite-sized chunks off of things. I kind of always subscribe to that zero inbox mentality. And that's not for everyone, right? It's just for whatever works for you. But like every time something comes up, right, that doesn't mean you have to do it that exact second, right? You don't want to mess up your workflow if you're in the middle of a project or a call or anything like that. But you just kind of can't let it wait, right? The sooner you can kind of tackle things, the sooner you can either, go enjoy those things in life that we talked about, right? You can go to the park, go to the beach, have that beer, or you can add things that are on your priority list that will add more value to your customers or your life and friends around you. So the sooner you can kind of shift that mindset into just kind of like immediate action, and the better off you'll be from a personal standpoint, and certainly the professional standpoint too. Absolutely. And I, love the questions you asked. Definitely got me the brain churning here this morning. I feel like I'll need go grab a beer myself after this and go decompress. But this is fun. This is why I exactly love the chance to kind of talk to people that, and again, you've talked to so many other founders that have kind of shared their versions of it too. Some that I've listened to from your previous episodes. So it's definitely cool, kind of seeing how others think about similar problems or the advice they give. Because as I said, right, I'm still trying to learn so much every day from things that I see around me and also others that I never even got the chance to meet. Life is short. Just go enjoy, do whatever makes you happy. I think again, it's a privilege that we get to be entrepreneurs and founders because of so many other sacrifices that either we make, our family makes, our parents, whoever make. And so at the end, think about why you're doing it. Don't wait. Don't think that, oh, I'll do all these things once I exit, right? Or once I sell the company or once I do whatever, right? Sprinkle them in. Make sure you kind of facilitate that in your everyday life. Yeah, and just I'm happy to chat if there's anything. I'm not a life coach. I'm not anything like that, but I will always share real experiences from what I've seen, and just always give that full transparency. So that's the stuff I love talking about. Of course. Thanks for having me. Yeah, happy to continue the conversation any other time.